Little girl was praying for leftovers until her brother dialed 911, and something shocking happened. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the cramped apartment on Corktown's bleakest street, each drop echoing like tears in the silence that had become their constant companion. 8-year-old Mia sat cross-legged on the threadbare carpet, her tiny hands pressed together in prayer, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness that seemed to swallow their hopes day after day. "Please, God, just some bread. Or maybe some crackers for Noah," she whispered, her stomach cramping with the familiar hunger that had become as regular as breathing. Her blonde curls, once bright like sunshine, now hung limp and unwashed around her pale face, but her blue eyes still held the innocent faith that tomorrow might bring something better. The apartment around them told the story of gradual decay and abandonment. Peeling wallpaper curled at the edges like dying leaves, revealing water stains that mapped years of neglect. The single light bulb that had provided their only illumination hung dark and useless since yesterday when the electricity company had finally made good on their threats. The refrigerator stood silent in the corner, its empty shelves a monument to promises unkept and resources stretched beyond breaking. 10-year-old Noah watched his little sister from the kitchen doorway, his heart breaking with each word of her innocent plea. At 10, he carried the weight of responsibility that should have belonged to adults, his thin shoulders bearing burdens that made him seem older than his years, but still within the realm of what a gifted, traumatized child might handle. His dark hair, so much like his father's though he didn't know it, fell across green eyes that had seen too much hardship, but maintained the intelligence and determination that trauma sometimes accelerated in resilient children. Their Aunt Carmen had left 3 days ago for another of her mysterious trips, leaving behind nothing but empty cabinets and broken promises. The electricity had been cut off yesterday, and the last of their cereal had disappeared this morning, leaving them with nothing but tap water and the kind of desperate hope that only children could maintain in the face of abandonment. Noah had been counting the hours since Carmen's departure, watching Mia grow weaker and more listless with each passing moment. At 10, he understood more than an 8-year-old should about their precarious situation. He'd tried everything his developing mind could conceive, checking the pockets of old coats for forgotten change, searching under cushions for lost coins, even attempting to ask neighbors for help until the hostile responses made it clear that everyone in their building was struggling with their own survival. Carmen had been smart about avoiding the authorities. She'd enrolled them in a small private school run by a church that asked few questions about irregular attendance, claiming they were homeschooled on days when she disappeared. She'd coached Noah carefully on what to say if anyone asked questions, that she was their guardian, that they were fine, that any problems were temporary. The few times social workers had made cursory visits, Carmen had been present, the apartment temporarily stocked with food, the children coached to give appropriate answers. But this time felt different. Carmen had been gone longer than usual, and Noah's 10-year-old mind understood that something fundamental had shifted. The old rotary phone in the kitchen had become his last hope. It was one of the few things still working in their deteriorating world, a relic from decades past that somehow maintained its connection to the outside world. Noah's small fingers trembled as he traced the numbers he'd memorized from countless television shows and adult conversations. At 10, he understood the gravity of what he was about to do. Calling 911 wasn't something you did lightly. But hunger had a way of clarifying priorities, and Mia's quiet suffering had pushed him past the point of caring about potential consequences. His thumb moved slowly across the dial. 911. The phone rang once, twice, and then a voice answered that would change everything. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was deep, authoritative, but somehow warm, like the father figures Noah had seen in movies and dreamed about in his loneliest moments. Noah's voice was steadier than it had been 2 years ago, but still carried the careful politeness of a child who'd learned to negotiate with unpredictable adults. I swear I'll be a better kid. Just tell my dad, we haven't eaten in days. Please, sir. I don't know what else to do anymore. Officer Marcus Thompson, 20-year veteran of the Detroit Police Department, felt his coffee mug freeze halfway to his lips. The precinct around him continued its usual chaos. Phones ringing, officers typing reports, the constant hum of urban law enforcement. But for Marcus, everything had suddenly gone silent, except for that small, desperate voice. In 2 decades of taking emergency calls, he'd heard everything. Murders, robberies, domestic violence, drug overdoses. But never anything that hit him quite like this. The voice was older than the usual abandoned child calls, more articulate, which somehow made it worse. This wasn't a toddler who didn't understand their situation. This was a child old enough to comprehend the full scope of their abandonment. Marcus had grown up poor himself, the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He recognized the particular desperation in Noah's voice, the shame mixed with hope, the adult responsibility forced onto child shoulders, the heartbreaking politeness of someone who believed they had to earn the right to basic care. "Son, what's your name?" Marcus asked gently, his training kicking in even as his heart constricted with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. "Noah. Noah Madison, sir. My sister Mia is 8, and she's really hungry. I promised I'd take care of her when Mama died, but I think I'm failing. I'm trying really hard, but I'm not big enough yet to get a real job or anything." The boy's voice carried the weight of 2 years of responsibility, the careful articulation of a child who'd been forced to mature quickly, but was still fundamentally a 10-year-old trying to navigate an adult world. "Where are you right now, Noah?" Marcus was already reaching for his keys, his partner Jake looking up with concern as Marcus's expression shifted into something beyond professional interest. 1247 Porter Street, apartment 2B. Our Aunt Carmen went away again, and she usually comes back after a few days, but it's been longer this time. She leaves us food, but we ran out yesterday. Noah's voice carried the practiced explanation of a child who'd learned to minimize their situation to avoid getting adults in trouble. Marcus was already heading for the door, but something in the boy's words nagged at him like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Madison. The name felt familiar, important somehow, though he couldn't place why. In his years working Detroit's toughest neighborhoods, he'd encountered thousands of families, learned hundreds of surnames, but this one resonated differently. "Noah, I'm coming to check on you and Mia, okay? Don't hang up the phone. Keep talking to me." "Yes, sir. Thank you for believing me. I know some adults think kids exaggerate when they say they're hungry, but we really haven't eaten since Tuesday morning, and today is Friday. I've been giving Mia most of the water so she doesn't get sick." Noah's matter-of-fact delivery made the situation even more heartbreaking. This child had learned to anticipate disbelief, to provide evidence for his suffering, to prioritize his sister's welfare over his own. As Marcus raced through the rain-soaked streets of Detroit, his patrol car cutting through puddles that reflected the neon signs of closed businesses and broken dreams, his mind kept working the details. Madison. Why did that name feel so significant? He'd been working these neighborhoods long enough to know most of the family names, the generational cycles of poverty and struggle, but this one felt different, important somehow. The radio crackled with other calls, domestic disturbances, theft reports, the usual Friday night chaos. But Marcus found himself completely focused on the small voice still chattering nervously through his earpiece. Noah was describing their daily routine, the games he played with Mia to distract her from hunger, his careful management of their dwindling resources. The picture emerging was of a child who had shouldered adult responsibilities with remarkable grace and intelligence, but who was still fundamentally a 10-year-old boy trying to protect his little sister. Meanwhile, just 12 miles away in the prestigious Palmer Woods neighborhood, where tree-lined streets whispered of old money and established power, CEO Jonathan Madison sat in his marble-floored study, reviewing quarterly reports that showed his automotive empire reaching unprecedented heights. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While his children starved in poverty, their father sat surrounded by luxury that could have fed 100 families for years. At 37, Jonathan commanded respect in boardrooms across the globe, his innovations revolutionizing electric vehicle technology and earning him a fortune that most people couldn't even comprehend. His company, Madison Automotive Technologies, had gone from a startup in his garage to a multinational corporation that employed thousands and was valued in the billions. Yet tonight, surrounded by all the trappings of success, Persian rugs, original artwork, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Something felt hollow about his achievements, like he was building monuments to fill a void that money couldn't touch. The photograph on his mahogany desk showed him with Victoria, his late wife, taken during their brief, passionate marriage 8 years ago. She had been his college sweetheart, the love of his life, the woman who understood his dreams and pushed him to achieve them. She had died in a car accident when she was 7 months pregnant with their first child, taking with her not just his heart, but his dreams of the family they'd planned to build together. The nursery they'd prepared remained locked and untouched, a shrine to possibilities that would never be. After Victoria's death, Jonathan had spiraled into a dark period of grief and poor decisions. He'd married Elena Rodriguez, Victoria's grief counselor, in a Vegas ceremony just 3 months after the funeral, a desperate attempt to fill the crushing emptiness that Victoria's death had left behind. The marriage had lasted only 2 months before Jonathan's guilt and Elena's confusion about her own feelings had torn them apart. He'd left Elena believing she was better off without his toxic grief, never knowing that she would discover her pregnancy just days after he moved out. Jonathan had no idea that at this very moment, 2 children bearing his last name were huddled together in a cold apartment just miles from his mansion, their empty stomachs cramping with hunger, while he sat surrounded by luxury. He had no idea that Elena had discovered her pregnancy after their separation, had tried desperately to contact him, had spent 2 years raising their children alone before cancer claimed her life. The cruel irony of proximity, that his children had been so close yet impossibly far, would soon become the defining tragedy and ultimate redemption of his life. Marcus pulled up to the weathered apartment building, its broken security door hanging askew like a mouth mid-scream. The building reeked of desperation and abandoned dreams, a stark contrast to the gleaming police cruiser that now sat in front of it, like a beacon of hope in an ocean of despair. The neighborhood around it showed the scars of economic decline, boarded windows, overgrown lots, the remnants of businesses that had once provided hope and employment. He climbed the narrow stairs 2 at a time, following the faint sound of Noah's voice still chattering nervously into the phone. The hallway smelled of mildew and broken plumbing, years of deferred maintenance creating an atmosphere of institutional neglect. "I can see your car lights from the window, officer. Thank you for coming." I was getting scared that maybe this time nobody would believe me. When Marcus knocked on the door of 2B, it opened immediately, as if Noah had been waiting right behind it. The boy stood there, taller than Marcus had expected, but still clearly a child, wearing clothes too big for his frame and eyes that held both intelligence and exhaustion. His jeans were rolled up at the cuffs, his t-shirt hung loose on his thin shoulders, and his sneakers had holes that had been carefully covered with duct tape. Behind him, Mia peeked out, her blonde curls matted and her blue eyes wide with cautious hope. "Officer Thompson?" Noah asked politely, as if inviting a guest for dinner rather than confessing to near starvation. His manners were impeccable, the kind of careful politeness that children developed when they learned early that adults held all the power and could be unpredictable in how they used it. "That's right, son. Marcus knelt down to meet Noah's eyes, immediately struck by something familiar in the boy's features. The strong jawline, the determined set of his shoulders, the way he held himself with quiet dignity despite his circumstances, it reminded him of someone, though he couldn't place who. "Can you show me around your home?" The apartment told a story of systematic neglect disguised as temporary hardship. The refrigerator hummed empty, its shelves bearing only the sticky residue of long-consumed condiments and the bitter smell of spoiled milk that had been cleaned up but never quite eliminated. The pantry held nothing but dust and mouse droppings, evidence of tiny scavengers who had found better pickings elsewhere. In the children's bedroom, Marcus found carefully folded clothes and neatly made beds, clear evidence that despite everything, these children maintained dignity and hope, taking pride in the few things they could control. "Noah, where does your Aunt Carmen work?" Marcus asked, his detective instincts noting the absence of any adult belongings or signs of regular habitation. "She says she does cleaning for different people, but she doesn't like to talk about work. She gets upset when we ask too many questions about where she goes." Noah's careful answer suggested a child who'd learned to navigate around an adult's secrets and unpredictable moods. But it was the shoebox under Noah's bed that changed everything forever. "What's this, Noah?" Marcus asked gently, holding up the weathered container that had been carefully hidden beneath the thin mattress. "Those are Mama's letters," Mia piped up before Noah could stop her, her 8-year-old innocence cutting through the careful secrets that Noah had been trying to protect. "Noah says we're not supposed to show them to anybody, but Mama's in heaven now, so maybe it's okay?" Noah's face flushed with embarrassment and fear as he looked between Marcus and his sister. At 10, he understood the weight of secrets in ways that 8-year-old Mia didn't. "I'm sorry, Officer Thompson. I know I shouldn't have taken them from Aunt Carmen's room, but they had our daddy's name on them and I thought maybe if I kept them safe, someday I could give them to him myself." With trembling hands that betrayed emotions he was trying to keep controlled, Noah opened the box. Inside were dozens of letters, all carefully preserved despite their age, all addressed to Jonathan Madison at Madison Automotive Technologies. Letters that had never been sent. Letters that told the story of a young woman's desperate attempts to contact the father of her children, growing more frantic and heartbroken with each unanswered attempt. Marcus's blood ran cold as he read the first letter, dated 6 years ago, written in careful handwriting that spoke of education and refinement. "My dearest Jonathan, I discovered I was pregnant just days after you left. I know our marriage was a mistake born from shared grief, and I understand why you had to go. But these babies, yes, babies, I'm having twins. They're innocent of our adult failures. I don't expect you to come back to me, but they deserve to know their father exists. I've tried calling your office, but they won't put me through. I'm hoping this letter reaches you. Our children need you, even if I can't be part of that relationship." Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis as he continued reading. The letter was signed Elena Madison, Noah and Mia's mother, who had discovered her pregnancy after Jonathan's departure. The letters painted a picture of a woman desperate to bridge a gap that seemed impossible to cross, writing letter after letter to a man who never responded because he never received them. As Marcus read deeper into the correspondence, the story became clearer and more heartbreaking. Elena had been alone and pregnant, trying to raise twins while dealing with her own grief counseling practice. The letters documented the children's growth, their first words, their first steps, their personalities developing. Elena had essentially been sending a father detailed reports about children he never knew existed, creating a one-sided relationship through words on paper. "Elena wrote about how she tried calling you first," Noah said quietly, sitting on the bed beside Marcus with the careful maturity of a child who'd learned to navigate adult emotions. "But your office said you didn't want to be disturbed, and Aunt Carmen said your number was changed anyway." Marcus pulled out another letter, this one dated 4 years ago. "Jonathan, the twins are 4 now. Noah is so protective of Mia, just like I imagine you would be with them. He's incredibly bright, already reading chapter books and asking questions about everything. Mia is artistic and joyful, finding wonder in the smallest things. I've been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The prognosis isn't good. I need you to know they exist before it's too late. Please at least acknowledge your children. They deserve to know their father, even if our relationship can't be repaired." The letters continued chronologically, documenting Elena's declining health and increasing desperation. She had been alone, dying, and terrified about what would happen to her children. "Mr. Madison didn't know about you," Marcus said, the pieces finally clicking into place with sickening clarity. Jonathan Madison wasn't just any CEO, he was the Jonathan Madison, the billionaire whose charitable foundation had funded the police department's community outreach programs for years. The man whose face appeared on billboards across the city, promoting clean energy and American innovation, was the father of these 2 children who'd been surviving on scraps. But how had the letters never reached him? How had these children remained hidden from their father for 6 years? As if reading his thoughts, Noah pulled out another piece of paper, this one much newer and clearly different from Elena's careful handwriting. It was a receipt from a post office box rental, signed by Carmen Rodriguez. The same Carmen who was supposed to be the children's guardian, the woman who had abandoned them for days at a time. "Aunt Carmen always said she was mailing the letters to our daddy," Noah explained, his voice carrying the weight of a betrayal he was only beginning to understand. But last month I followed her to the post office because I was curious about where she went all the time. I saw her put Mama's letters in a box instead of sending them. When I asked her why, she got really mad and said our daddy was too rich and important to care about kids like us, that the letters would just make him angry. Marcus's jaw clenched as the pieces fell into place with disturbing clarity. Carmen had been intercepting Elena's letters for years, probably collecting welfare payments and insurance money while keeping the children isolated from their father. Elena had died believing her ex-husband simply didn't care enough to respond to her desperate pleas for acknowledgement. "There's more," Noah said quietly, pulling out a thick manila envelope from the bottom of the box. "These are the letters Mama wrote but never finished. The ones she was still working on when she got too sick to write anymore." Marcus opened the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. The letters inside were different, more desperate, more frantic, written in handwriting that grew shakier with each page. "Jonathan, I'm dying, and I have perhaps weeks left. Carmen has promised to take care of Noah and Mia, but I'm terrified. She's been acting strange lately, asking questions about your business, about how much money you have. I think she's more interested in the children as a source of income than as family to love. Please, if you've ever felt anything for me, if our brief marriage meant anything at all, please don't let my children grow up thinking their father abandoned them. They're innocent in all of this." The final letter was barely legible, clearly written by someone whose strength was fading. "I never sent the other letters because Carmen convinced me you wouldn't want to be bothered. She said rich men like you have lawyers to handle problems, like unexpected children. But I can't die without trying one more time. Noah is so much like you. Determined, intelligent, protective of those he loves. Mia has your stubborn streak, but Elena's joy. If anything happens to me, please know that they are the best parts of both of us. Carmen has promised to mail this letter after I'm gone, but I'm scared she won't. I'm giving her money to ensure she does, but I don't trust her completely anymore. Please find them, Jonathan. Please love them." Marcus had to step away, his own eyes burning with tears he hadn't shed in years. In 20 years of police work, he'd seen plenty of family tragedies, but never one that felt this preventable, this cruel in its simplicity. A few delivered letters could have changed everything. Could have saved Elena from dying alone and afraid. Could have prevented 2 children from growing up in poverty and neglect. "Noah, Mia," Marcus said carefully, his voice thick with emotion he was struggling to control. "I think I know where your daddy is, and I think he's been looking for you this whole time, even though he didn't know where to look." Mia's eyes lit up like stars, her 8-year-old heart immediately embracing the possibility of dreams coming true. "Really? Is he nice? Does he like little girls who sometimes have bad dreams? Does he know how to make pancakes?" "I think," Marcus said, looking at the letters that held 6 years of heartbreak and hope, "he's going to love you both more than you can imagine. And I think he's going to want to learn how to make the best pancakes in the world just for you." Noah's expression was more cautious, his 10-year-old wisdom tempering his hope. "But what if he doesn't want us? What if Aunt Carmen was right about him being too important for kids like us? What if he has a new family now?" Marcus knelt down to meet Noah's eyes directly. "Son, your father is going to want you so much that he'll probably cry when he meets you. The only reason he hasn't been part of your life is because he never knew you existed. And that's about to change right now." But even as he said the words, Marcus wondered how he was going to explain to Jonathan Madison that his whole life was about to change forever. How do you tell a man that the family he never knew he had has been alive and suffering just miles away from his mansion? How do you bridge 6 years of manufactured separation with a single phone call? The rain continued to fall outside, but inside apartment 2B something was shifting. Hope, fragile as butterfly wings but determined as steel, was beginning to stir in the hearts of 2 children who had almost given up on miracles. Marcus reached for his phone, knowing that the next call he made would either reunite a family or shatter them further. Jonathan Madison's private number was already programmed into his contacts from their work on community programs. A cruel irony that the man's philanthropic efforts had put him in Marcus's phone, while his own children struggled with hunger just miles away. As the phone rang, Marcus looked at Noah and Mia, who were watching him with the kind of trust that only children could give. Not absolute and naive anymore, but hopeful despite their experiences, willing to believe that sometimes adults could fix things if they just tried hard enough. Whatever happened next, he was determined to make it right. The call connected, and a familiar voice answered. Jonathan Madison speaking. Marcus took a deep breath that felt like it contained 6 years of held hopes and broken dreams. Mr. Madison, this is Officer Marcus Thompson with Detroit PD. I'm calling about Noah and Mia Madison. Sir, I believe they're your children. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. When Jonathan finally spoke, his voice was barely recognizable, raw, shattered, desperate, like a man receiving news that his entire understanding of reality had been wrong. That's impossible. I don't have children. Elena and I. Our marriage was so brief, and when it ended, I thought, Officer Thompson, I don't understand what you're saying. Sir, I'm looking at letters right now. Dozens of letters from Elena Madison to you, dating back 6 years. Letters about twins, Noah and Mia. Letters that were never sent, never delivered. Sir, your ex-wife had children, and they've been waiting for you their whole lives. Marcus heard what sounded like a chair scraping against marble, followed by Jonathan's ragged breathing and what might have been a glass hitting the floor. Elena was pregnant? When we separated, I had no idea. Dear God, I had no idea. Mr. Madison, Elena died 2 years ago from cancer. These children have been living with their aunt Carmen Rodriguez, who has apparently been intercepting every letter Elena ever tried to send you. The children have been told their entire lives that you don't want them, that you're too rich and important to care about them. The sound that came through the phone was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. A grown man's heart breaking in real time, 6 years of missed birthdays and lost opportunities colliding with impossible hope. My children? They're alive? They think I abandoned them. They think I chose not to. Oh God, what kind of monster do they think I am? Noah, who had been listening with wide eyes that seemed to take up half his thin face, suddenly grabbed Marcus's sleeve with surprising strength. Is that him? Is that our daddy? He sounds really sad. Marcus nodded, and without hesitation, Noah reached for the phone with the kind of courage that only children possessed. Daddy? This is Noah. Mia and I have been waiting for you to come get us. We've been really good, I promise. On the other end of the line, Jonathan Madison, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, who had built an empire through sheer force of will and intellect, began to weep like a child. Noah, is that really you, son? Oh God, is that really your voice? Yes, sir. I'm 10 now and Mia is 8. We had birthday parties with just us two and cupcakes from the corner store when we could afford them. Aunt Carmen sometimes remembers our birthdays, but usually she's too busy with her other stuff. Noah's matter-of-fact delivery of heartbreaking details hit Jonathan like physical blows. Son, I'm coming to get you right now. I'm coming to get both of you. I should have been there for every birthday, every day, every moment. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. It's okay, Daddy. Mama told us before she went to heaven that sometimes daddies get lost, but they always find their way home eventually. She said you were probably just stuck somewhere far away, but that you'd come looking for us when you could. Marcus had to step away from the conversation, his own eyes burning with emotions he'd thought he'd buried years ago. In 20 years of police work, he'd seen plenty of family reunions, but never one that felt this monumentally important. These weren't just two hungry children about to be rescued. This was a family being born from the ashes of 6 years of separation and lies. Can I talk to my sister? Jonathan asked, his voice still thick with tears. Mia bounced over to the phone with the enthusiasm that 8-year-olds could muster even in difficult circumstances, her resilience a testament to Noah's protection and care. Hi, Daddy. Do you like pancakes? I really like pancakes, but we don't have any right now. Noah says you're really tall and have a nice car and probably live in a big house. Jonathan's laugh was half sob, half pure joy. I love pancakes, sweetheart. And yes, I have cars and a big house. Would you like to come see them? Would you like to come home? Can Noah come too? I don't go places without Noah. He takes care of me when Aunt Carmen goes away. Of course Noah can come. From now on, we're all going to stick together. No more being apart, no more being hungry, no more being scared, I promise you both." 25 minutes later, the sound of an expensive engine pulling up outside drew everyone's attention. Through the rain-streaked window, Marcus watched Jonathan Madison step out of a silver Tesla that probably cost more than most people made in 2 years. Even in the dim streetlight, Marcus could see the man's usually perfect appearance was disheveled. His suit wrinkled, his hands shaking as he approached the building like a man walking toward either his salvation or his destruction. Jonathan Madison had been in thousands of high-pressure situations, IPO launches, merger negotiations, board confrontations that determined the fate of thousands of employees. Nothing had prepared him for climbing 2 flights of stairs to meet the children he'd never known existed. His heart hammered against his ribs as Officer Thompson opened the door, and suddenly he was face to face with his legacy. And there they were. Noah stood tall for his 10 years, protective instincts evident in how he positioned himself slightly in front of his sister, ready to shield her from any potential threat. His resemblance to Jonathan was unmistakable. The same dark hair, the same green eyes, the same serious expression that spoke of intelligence and responsibility shouldered too young. But it was Mia who stole Jonathan's breath completely. Blonde curls like Elena's, but with features that were clearly his own, as if genetics had carefully blended the best of both parents to create this perfect little person. "Daddy?" Mia whispered, tilting her head with curiosity rather than shyness, studying him with the intense focus that children brought to important moments. Jonathan knelt on the worn carpet, opening his arms hesitantly, afraid that any sudden movement might break the spell of this impossible moment. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your daddy." Mia walked straight into his embrace with the trust that 8-year-olds could still offer when they sensed genuine love, her small arms wrapping around his neck with a strength that broke and mended Jonathan's heart simultaneously. "You smell like expensive soap," she announced with 8-year-old honesty. "And you're really, really tall." "Noah said you would be." Noah hung back for a moment, studying Jonathan with the careful assessment of a child who'd learned to be cautious, who'd been disappointed by adults too many times to trust easily. At 10, he understood more about the complexity of their situation than Mia did. "Are you going to take care of us now?" "Because I've been trying really hard for 2 years, but I think I need help. It's harder than I thought it would be." Jonathan reached out with his free arm, and after a moment's hesitation that spoke to learned wariness, Noah stepped into the embrace. The weight of his son in his arms, solid and real and alive, made Jonathan's legs nearly buckle. "Son, you've done such an incredible, amazing job, but you're not supposed to take care of everyone else. You're supposed to be a kid. I'm going to take care of you and Mia from now on. I promise you that, with everything I have." Marcus watched the reunion with professional detachment warring against deep personal emotion. He'd been a cop long enough to know that promises were fragile things, easily broken by circumstance and good intentions that couldn't survive the reality of damaged lives. But something about the way Jonathan held those children, like he was afraid they might disappear if he let go, like they were the most precious things in a world full of treasures, suggested this promise would be different. "Mr. Madison," Marcus said gently, reluctant to interrupt but knowing the practical matters couldn't wait indefinitely. "We need to discuss the legal aspects. Carmen Rodriguez has been their legal guardian since Elena's death. There will be paperwork, investigations, custody procedures that could take time." Jonathan looked up, his arms still wrapped protectively around his children, his expression shifting into something Marcus recognized, the focused determination of a man who had built an empire and wouldn't let bureaucracy stand between him and his family. "Whatever it takes. Every lawyer I have, every resource at my disposal. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. These are my children." "Daddy," Mia said, pulling back to look at his face with the serious expression she wore when asking important questions. "Are you really rich?" "Noah said maybe you were rich because Mama's letters talked about your big company that helps the environment." Jonathan laughed despite his tears, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. "Yes, sweetheart, I have a lot of money, which means you and Noah will never have to worry about food or clothes or having a warm place to sleep ever again." "Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" Noah asked with the careful hope of a child who'd learned not to ask for too much. who'd been disappointed too many times to expect miracles, but was willing to hope for small ones. "We can have anything you want. Pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if that makes you happy. Ice cream, pizza, toys, books, bicycles, whatever your heart's desire." But even as Jonathan made these promises, Marcus could see the overwhelming nature of the situation beginning to hit him. This wasn't just about providing material things. These children had been traumatized, abandoned, forced to grow up too fast. Healing their emotional wounds would take much more than money and good intentions. It would take time, patience, professional help, and the kind of love that could overcome years of damage. "Mr. Madison," Marcus said quietly, "before we leave here, I need to know where Carmen Rodriguez is. The children say she's been gone for 3 days, but my experience tells me there's more to this story." Noah's expression darkened with the kind of adult understanding that no 10-year-old should possess. "She said she was going to see friends in Chicago, but she lies a lot about where she goes. Sometimes she comes back with money, sometimes she's really angry about something. She told us never to tell anyone about the letters or about Daddy, said it would get us all in trouble." The picture forming in Marcus's mind was increasingly disturbing, but he would save those details for later. For now, these children needed food, medical checkups, and the beginning of stability that they'd been denied for too long. As they prepared to leave the apartment that had been Noah and Mia's prison for so long, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his partner. "Carmen Rodriguez picked up at MGM Grand Casino on outstanding warrants. Claims she has information about Madison case that will blow everyone's mind. Wants to make a deal." Marcus showed Jonathan the message, watching the color drain from the billionaire's face. What kind of information could she possibly have? "I don't know, but people who build elaborate lies usually have backup plans. We'll deal with whatever she's planning tomorrow. Tonight, these children need their father." From the kitchen came Mrs. Chen's voice as she helped the children gather their few precious possessions, her maternal instincts immediately embracing her employer's newfound family. The sound of laughter mixing with gentle instructions created the first notes of what would become a symphony of healing. But Marcus knew that the hardest revelations were still to come. The ride to Jonathan's mansion was a journey between worlds. Noah and Mia pressed their faces against the Tesla's windows, marveling at the smooth, silent ride that was so different from the few times they'd been in Carmen's beat-up sedan. The car's interior, with its leather seats and sophisticated technology, was like a spaceship to children who'd spent their lives navigating poverty. "Daddy, why doesn't your car make noise?" Mia asked, her natural curiosity emerging despite the overwhelming day. "It's electric, sweetheart. It runs on battery power instead of gasoline, so it's much quieter and better for the environment." "Did you invent it?" Noah asked, his 10-year-old mind already grasping that his father was someone important in ways he was just beginning to understand. "I helped design some of the technology that makes it work. My company builds cars like this one." "Cool," Noah said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children brought to extraordinary circumstances. "Do you think we could see your factory sometime? I've been reading about electric cars at the library." "Son, you can see anything you want. The factory, my office, the research labs. It's all part of your world now." Jonathan's mansion in Palmer Woods rose before them like something from a fairy tale. As their car wound up the circular driveway past perfectly manicured gardens and fountains that sparkled even in the rain, both children fell silent with wonder. "Is this really where we're going to live?" Mia whispered, her breath fogging the window. "This is home," Jonathan said simply, though Marcus noticed how his hands trembled slightly as he parked. The magnitude of the change was hitting everyone. Two children who'd lived in poverty were about to inherit a world of unlimited resources, and a billionaire who'd lived in isolation was about to become an instant father to two children who'd been raising themselves. Mrs. Chen, Jonathan's housekeeper, appeared as if summoned by magic, her arms full of groceries for an impromptu dinner. She was a kind-faced woman in her 60s who had worked for Jonathan since he'd moved into the mansion, and her eyes immediately softened when she saw the children. "Mr. Madison called ahead," she said with the gentle authority of someone who'd been taking care of people her entire life. "I have everything ready for pancakes, and I've prepared the blue bedroom upstairs for the children. Mrs. Chen, I'd like you to meet my son Noah and my daughter Mia. Children, this is Mrs. Chen. She helps take care of our home, and she's going to help take care of you too. Mrs. Chen immediately crouched down to the children's level, her smile warm and welcoming. Well, aren't you two beautiful? I've been waiting years for this house to have children in it again. Come with me to the kitchen. I want to show you where everything is so you'll always know where to find food when you're hungry. As Mrs. Chen led the children away, chattering about pancake shapes and whether they preferred syrup or jam, Marcus pulled Jonathan aside in the study. We need to talk about Carmen Rodriguez. And we need to talk about what comes next, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Jonathan poured himself a whiskey with hands that still weren't quite steady. Tell me what you think Carmen's angle is. She's been collecting significant money on behalf of the children. Social Security survivors' benefits, Elena's life insurance policy, state assistance. We're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over 2 years. But there's something else. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Jonathan a series of financial records his partner had compiled. Carmen's been living in a house in Grosse Pointe that she's been renting under Elena's name. She's been using Elena's identity to maintain benefits, file tax returns, even apply for credit cards. Jonathan's jaw clenched as the implications hit him. She's been profiting from my children's suffering while keeping them in poverty. But here's what worries me. Carmen has been careful to avoid social services. She enrolled the kids in a small private church school that doesn't ask many questions about irregular attendance. She coached Noah on what to say if anyone official came around. This wasn't just neglect, this was calculated. Marcus hesitated before delivering the next piece of information. There's more. Carmen's been in regular contact with someone else. Phone records show multiple calls to a number registered to Sarah Mitchell. Jonathan's blood went cold. Victoria's sister Sarah? What would Carmen have to do with Sarah? That's what we need to find out. But Jonathan, I think this conspiracy goes deeper than just Carmen intercepting letters. I think there are people who actively wanted to keep you separated from your children. Before Jonathan could respond, Noah appeared in the doorway, his face pale and serious in the way that showed he'd been thinking deeply about their situation. Daddy? Officer Marcus? I heard you talking about Aunt Carmen. Is she in trouble? Because if she is, I think there are some things you should know. Jonathan immediately crossed to his son, kneeling down to meet his eyes. Noah, whatever you want to tell us, you're safe now. Carmen can't hurt you or Mia anymore. Noah took a deep breath, gathering the courage that had sustained him through 2 years of adult responsibilities. Aunt Carmen used to get phone calls from a lady who made her really upset. The lady would tell Carmen what to do, and Carmen didn't like it, but she would do it anyway. I heard Carmen call her Miss Sarah once. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place with disturbing clarity. Noah, did you ever hear what this Miss Sarah told Carmen to do? She told Carmen to make sure we never tried to contact Daddy. She said rich people have lawyers who make problems like us disappear, and that Daddy would be angry if he found out about us. She told Carmen to keep the letters safe but never send them, because someday they might be important. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists as the scope of the betrayal became clear. Sarah hadn't just failed to help him find his children, she had actively prevented it. Did Carmen seem afraid of this Sarah person? Yeah. Carmen was mean to us sometimes, but she was always scared when Miss Sarah called. She would drink the bottles that made her sleepy after those calls, and she'd cry sometimes. Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent text from his partner. Carmen Rodriguez talking. Says Sarah Mitchell paid her to keep the children hidden. Claims she has recordings of their conversations. Wants protection in exchange for evidence. It looks like we're about to get some answers, Marcus said, showing Jonathan the message. From the kitchen came the sound of children's laughter mixing with Mrs. Chen's delighted voice as she helped them flip pancakes. The contrast between the joy in that sound and the dark possibilities they were discussing was almost jarring. Mr. Madison, Marcus continued, I need you to understand what's coming. When this story breaks, and it will break, there's going to be media attention like you've never experienced. The story of a billionaire's secret children kept hidden by family conspiracy is going to be international news. Jonathan looked toward the kitchen where his children were experiencing their first taste of abundance and safety. They've been through enough. I won't let the media turn them into a circus. Then we need to control the narrative. Tell the story on your terms before someone else tells it for you. But first, we need to hear what Carmen has to say. 2 hours later, Marcus sat across from Carmen Rodriguez in an interview room at Detroit Police Headquarters. Carmen looked smaller than her arrest photos suggested, diminished by fear and the weight of secrets she'd carried for too long. "I want immunity," Carmen said immediately, her voice shaky but determined. "Full immunity for everything, and witness protection if Sarah comes after me." "That depends on what you have to offer," Marcus replied. "Start talking." Carmen pulled out a small digital recorder, the same one Noah had seen her use during her mysterious phone calls. "I recorded everything, every conversation with Sarah Mitchell for the past 2 years. I knew she'd eventually try to throw me under the bus." She pressed play, and Sarah's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "The children can never know about their father until they're adults, if ever. As long as Jonathan believes Elena abandoned him, he'll stay away. And as long as the children believe he abandoned them, they won't try to contact him." Carmen's voice responded, "But what if Elena left other letters? What if someone finds them?" "That's why you need to keep the children isolated. No friends, no teachers who ask too many questions, no social workers. If anyone gets suspicious, you move them somewhere else. I have contacts in other states who can help." Marcus felt sick as the recording continued. This wasn't just about money, it was about systematically destroying any possibility of family reunion. "Why?" Marcus asked when the recording ended. "Why did Sarah want to keep them apart?" Carmen's answer chilled him to the bone. Sarah said Jonathan didn't deserve happiness after Victoria died. She said he'd dishonored Victoria's memory by marrying Elena so quickly. Keeping him isolated, keeping him from his children, that was her punishment for him. "And you went along with this?" "Sarah paid me $50,000 up front and $5,000 a month to keep the children hidden. She said if I ever told Jonathan about them, she'd make sure I went to prison for fraud." Carmen's voice broke. "I needed the money. I had gambling debts, drug problems, but those kids, they deserved better than what I gave them." Marcus continued the interview for another hour, documenting the full scope of Sarah's conspiracy. It was more elaborate and more cruel than he'd imagined. A systematic effort to punish Jonathan by denying him the family he'd never known he had. When Marcus returned to Jonathan's mansion near midnight, he found the billionaire sitting in his kitchen, watching his children sleep at the breakfast table. They'd eaten their fill of pancakes and fallen asleep right there, Mia's head on Noah's shoulder. Both of them finally relaxed for the first time in months. "They were afraid to go to bed," Jonathan said quietly. "Afraid they'd wake up and this would all be a dream. So I told them they could sleep wherever they felt safe." Marcus sat down across from Jonathan, the weight of what he'd learned pressing down on him. "Jonathan, Sarah Mitchell orchestrated this entire conspiracy. She paid Carmen to keep your children hidden, not for money, but for revenge. She wanted to punish you for moving on after Victoria's death." Jonathan's face went through a series of emotions: shock, rage, grief, and finally a cold determination that Marcus recognized from news stories about hostile corporate takeovers. "Where is Sarah now?" "We don't know. She disappeared yesterday, just before Carmen was arrested, but we'll find her. Jonathan looked at his sleeping children, their faces peaceful in a way that suggested they finally felt safe. "It doesn't matter anymore. Sarah stole 6 years from us, but she can't steal what comes next." "There's something else," Marcus said gently. "Carmen kept all of Elena's final letters, the ones Elena wrote in her last weeks. They're difficult to read, but I think you need to see them." Marcus handed Jonathan a manila envelope, watching the man's face as he read Elena's final words. "Jonathan, I'm dying, and I need you to know that keeping our children from you was never my choice. Carmen convinced me that you didn't want to know about them, that acknowledging them would only cause you pain. I believed her because I was weak and scared and dying. But Noah is so much like you, brilliant, protective, stubborn in the best way. And Mia has your sense of justice, your refusal to give up when things get hard. They're going to grow up to change the world, with or without you. But they would be extraordinary with a father who loves them, I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fight for them. Please be strong enough to love them." Jonathan read the letter twice, tears streaming down his face as he finally understood the full scope of what had been taken from all of them. Elena had died believing she was protecting him from unwanted responsibility, while he had lived 6 years never knowing that the family he'd dreamed of actually existed. "She never knew," Jonathan whispered. "Elena died thinking I didn't want our children. But your children are here now," Marcus said firmly, "and they know you want them. That's what matters." At that moment, Noah stirred, opening his eyes and immediately looking around to make sure everyone was still there. When he saw Jonathan and Marcus, he relaxed again. "Daddy, are you okay? You look sad." Jonathan moved to gather both children into his arms, careful not to wake Mia completely. "I'm not sad anymore, son. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." As they made their way upstairs to get the children properly settled for the night, Marcus felt his phone buzz with another urgent message. Sarah Mitchell had been spotted at Toronto Airport, attempting to board a flight to Switzerland under a false passport. By morning, Sarah Mitchell would be in custody. By morning, the real healing could begin. 3 days later, Marcus sat in the observation room of the federal courthouse, watching Sarah Mitchell enter the interrogation room in handcuffs. She looked smaller than he'd expected, her usual composed appearance replaced by the haggard look of someone who'd been running from consequences that had finally caught up with her. Sarah's expensive attorney sat beside her, but even his presence couldn't hide the fact that the evidence against her was overwhelming. Carmen's recordings, financial records, and documented communications painted a picture of a conspiracy so calculated and cruel that even experienced prosecutors were shaken by its scope. "My client is willing to cooperate fully," the lawyer began. But Sarah cut him off with a sharp gesture. "I don't want to cooperate. I want to explain why what I did was necessary." Marcus leaned forward, fascinated despite himself by the psychology of someone who could justify 6 years of child abandonment as necessary. Sarah looked directly into the camera, her voice steady and cold. "Jonathan Madison dishonored my sister's memory by marrying Elena Rodriguez 3 months after Victoria's funeral. Victoria had been the love of his life, his partner in building everything he achieved, and he replaced her with a grief counselor like she was a business transaction." The prosecutor, District Attorney Rebecca Chen, maintained her professional composure. "Ms. Mitchell, explain how that justified keeping Mr. Madison from his children. Those children were a mistake, a product of Jonathan's grief and poor judgment. Victoria died carrying his child, his real child, his planned child. These other children were just accidents that resulted from his inability to process grief appropriately." Marcus felt sick listening to Sarah's clinical description of Noah and Mia as accidents, unwanted complications in her twisted vision of preserving Victoria's memory. "When Elena got pregnant, I saw an opportunity to protect Victoria's legacy. If Jonathan knew about the children, he might have gone back to Elena, might have tried to make that marriage work out of obligation. That would have been a final insult to everything Victoria meant to him. So you convinced Carmen Rodriguez to help you keep the children secret. Carmen was easily motivated by money, and she understood that sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. I provided her with sufficient funds to care for the children while keeping them away from Jonathan." The prosecutor pulled out financial records that told a different story. "Ms. Mitchell, Carmen used Elena's identity to collect over $400,000 in benefits and insurance payouts over 2 years. Meanwhile, the children were living in poverty. Where did that money go?" Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "Carmen's personal financial decisions were not my responsibility. I paid her to maintain the children's separation from Jonathan. How she chose to interpret care was up to her. You knew the children were being neglected. I knew they were being kept away from a man who would have seen them as obligations rather than gifts. Jonathan's guilt over Victoria's death would have made him a terrible father to Elena's children." Marcus had heard enough justification. He entered the interrogation room with a file folder full of evidence that would destroy Sarah's narrative completely. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Officer Marcus Thompson. I'm the one who found your nephew and niece 3 days ago, starving in an apartment while you lived comfortably on money meant for their care." Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "Those children are not my nephew and niece. They're the unfortunate result of Jonathan's temporary inability to honor Victoria's memory. "Let me tell you what your temporary inability created," Marcus said, pulling out photographs of Noah and Mia from the night he found them. A 10-year-old boy who'd been caring for his 8-year-old sister for 2 years. A little girl who prayed for crackers because they hadn't eaten in 3 days. Children who thought their father didn't want them because you convinced them he was too important to care. He laid out more photos: the empty apartment, the intercepted letters, the evidence of systematic neglect. This is what your protection of Victoria's memory looked like in practice. Sarah studied the photos without visible emotion. Unfortunate but necessary. Jonathan needed to understand the consequences of dishonoring Victoria. Sometimes lessons require sacrifice. Whose sacrifice, Sarah? Yours? Or 2 innocent children who never did anything except exist? For the first time, Sarah's mask slipped completely. Victoria was pregnant when she died. She was carrying Jonathan's real child, his planned child, his wanted child. These other children are just reminders of his betrayal, of how quickly he moved on from the woman who made his success possible. Marcus felt the full scope of Sarah's delusion becoming clear. This wasn't just about money or family legacy. It was about a woman who couldn't accept that life continued after loss, that love could exist in multiple forms, that Jonathan's brief marriage to Elena didn't negate his love for Victoria. "Sarah, did it ever occur to you that Victoria might have wanted Jonathan to find love again? That she might have wanted him to be happy? Victoria wanted Jonathan to remember her, to honor what they built together, not to replace her with the first woman who showed him sympathy." The interrogation continued for another hour, but Sarah never wavered from her position that she'd been protecting Victoria's memory and saving Jonathan from making a mistake. She showed no remorse for the children's suffering, no understanding that her actions had caused immeasurable pain. When Marcus left the courthouse, he drove directly to Jonathan's mansion, where a very different scene was unfolding. Noah and Mia were in the backyard with their father, planting a garden that would ensure they always had fresh food. Jonathan knelt in the dirt beside his children, his expensive suit forgotten as he helped them create something beautiful together. "Look, Daddy," Mia shouted, running over with dirt under her fingernails and pure joy on her face. "The tomatoes are going to grow really big." The sight of his daughter's excitement over tiny seedlings moved Jonathan more than any business success ever had. This was what he'd been missing all those years. Not just the big moments, but the small daily miracles that made life worth living. Noah was carefully spacing lettuce seeds, his 10-year-old precision evident in every movement. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen says we can plant herbs too, so we can cook special meals together." "We can plant anything you want, son. This is your garden, your home, your life now." Marcus watched the family work together, struck by how quickly they'd begun to heal. Professional counseling was helping all of them process their experiences, but the foundation of their recovery was simply being together, being safe, being loved. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing stories and laughter, Marcus's phone buzzed with news from the courthouse. Sarah Mitchell had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment. Carmen Rodriguez received 5 years with possibility of parole in 3, her cooperation having earned her some leniency. But for Marcus, the real justice wasn't happening in courtrooms. It was happening right here, in the daily work of rebuilding a family that had been torn apart by adult selfishness and cruelty. "Uncle Marcus," Mia said, using the title she'd bestowed on him after their first pancake breakfast together. "Are you going to come to our school play next week? I'm going to be a sunflower. I wouldn't miss it for anything, sweetheart. And I'm going to be the narrator," Noah added with quiet pride. "I get to tell the whole story and make sure everyone understands what's happening." Jonathan reached over and ruffled his son's hair. "That sounds perfect for you, Noah. You've always been good at making sure people understand important things." As the evening wound down and the children went upstairs to get ready for bed, Jonathan pulled Marcus aside. "I've been thinking about Elena," Jonathan said quietly. "About how she died believing I didn't want our children. I can't bring her back, but I can make sure her sacrifice wasn't meaningless." "What do you mean?" "I'm establishing the Elena Madison Foundation, a legal aid organization to help families navigate systems that keep them separated. No parent should die believing their children are unwanted. No child should grow up thinking their parent abandoned them. Marcus nodded, understanding the healing that came from turning pain into purpose. Elena would be proud of that, and proud of the father you've become. I'm still learning. Every day, Noah and Mia teach me something new about resilience, about love, about what really matters. Sarah thought she was punishing me by keeping them away, but in the end, finding them saved me from a life that was successful but empty. As Marcus prepared to leave, Noah appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas. "Daddy, Uncle Marcus, thank you for finding each other. Mama always said that sometimes the best things happen when you're brave enough to ask for help." Looking at this family that had been rebuilt from the ashes of conspiracy and cruelty, Marcus realized that Noah was right. Sometimes the most important rescue wasn't about saving people from immediate danger. It was about saving them from a lifetime of believing they were alone. The 911 call that had started with a child's desperate plea had ended with the most important rescue of all. A father saved from grief, children saved from abandonment, and a family saved from the lies that had kept them apart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build their life together. But tonight, everyone was home where they belonged. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the back of Detroit's Museum of Science watching Noah confidently present his science fair project on renewable energy to a panel of judges. The 10-year-old had become fascinated with his father's work, spending hours in Jonathan's lab asking questions and absorbing information with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. "My dad says that taking care of the planet is like taking care of a family," Noah explained to the judges, his voice clear and confident. "You have to pay attention, make sure everyone has what they need, and fix problems before they get too big." In the audience, Jonathan beamed with pride while Mia drew pictures of the various exhibits they'd seen. She'd adapted to her new life with the resilience that 8-year-olds possessed, throwing herself into art classes, dance lessons, and the simple joy of having enough food and endless opportunities to learn. "And my sister Mia helps too," Noah continued, gesturing toward his family. "She draws pictures of all the animals that need clean air and water, so we remember why the work is important." Marcus felt a deep satisfaction watching this family that had been forged from crisis and strengthened through love. The media attention had been intense but manageable, with Jonathan's PR team crafting a narrative focused on reunion and healing rather than the sensational aspects of the conspiracy. Several documentary filmmakers had approached about telling their story, but Jonathan had turned them all down. "This isn't entertainment," he told one particularly persistent producer. "These are real children who deserve to heal in private." The legal proceedings had concluded with Sarah Mitchell serving her sentence and showing no signs of remorse for her actions. Carmen Rodriguez had been released after serving 18 months, participating in drug rehabilitation programs, and providing extensive testimony about the conspiracy. She'd tried to contact Jonathan once, seeking forgiveness, but he'd declined to meet with her. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. Dr. Sarah Kim, the family therapist who'd been working with them since the beginning, had marveled at their progress. Children who experience early trauma often struggle with attachment and trust, she'd explained during one of their sessions. But Noah and Mia had something powerful working in their favor. They maintained their bond with each other and they never lost their capacity for love. That's remarkable resilience. The sessions weren't always easy. Noah still occasionally had anxiety about being responsible for Mia's well-being, requiring gentle reminders that he could simply be her brother now, not her caretaker. Mia sometimes hoarded snacks in her room, unable to fully believe that food would always be available. Jonathan struggled with guilt that threatened to consume him, guilt over not fighting harder to maintain contact with Elena, guilt over the years of suffering he could have prevented. But they were healing together, building new traditions and memories that slowly began to outweigh the painful ones. The science fair wrapped up with Noah's project taking second place, a result that thrilled him more than any business award had ever excited Jonathan. As they walked through the museum afterward, Mia chattering about the dinosaur exhibit while Noah explained the physics of the planetarium show, Marcus reflected on how completely their lives had been transformed. "Uncle Marcus, Mia said, slipping her hand into his as they walked. Do you think Mama knows we found Daddy? It was a question she asked periodically, her 8-year-old mind still working to process the complex emotions of loss and discovery. I think your mama knows, sweetheart, and I think she's very happy that you're all together now. Good, because I want to tell her about our garden when I see her again someday. The garden had become a symbol of their new life together. What had started as Mia's practical desire to ensure food security had evolved into a family project that provided both sustenance and joy. They grew vegetables, herbs, and flowers, with each plant representing a hope they were nurturing together. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing stories from their day, Jonathan's phone rang with a call that would open an unexpected new chapter in their story. Mr. Madison, this is Detective Rodriguez with Phoenix PD. We have a situation here that we think might interest you. A 7-year-old boy called 911 yesterday saying he and his little sister haven't eaten in days. When we investigated, we found out his father is Marcus Santana, the tech entrepreneur. The children have been living with an aunt who's been intercepting the father's attempts to contact them. The parallels to your case are striking. Jonathan looked across the table at his children, then at Marcus, understanding immediately what was being asked of him. What do you need from us? Mr. Santana is flying in tomorrow. He's never been through anything like this, and we thought, maybe someone who's walked this path could help guide him through it. Of course, whatever we can do to help. After Jonathan hung up, Noah looked at his father with the serious expression he wore when processing important information. Daddy, are there other kids like us? Kids whose daddies don't know they exist? Unfortunately, yes, son. But the good news is that we can help them find each other, just like Uncle Marcus helped us find each other. Can we really help, even though we're just kids? Especially because you're kids. You understand what it feels like to wait and hope and wonder if anyone's looking for you. That makes you experts in something very important. The next day, Marcus accompanied Jonathan and his children to meet Marcus Santana, a successful tech entrepreneur whose own story of separation and reunion was just beginning. The man was a wreck, grief-stricken, angry, desperate for answers about why his children had been kept from him. How do you live with the guilt? Santana asked Jonathan during their first conversation. How do you not hate everyone who was involved in keeping you apart? Jonathan considered the question carefully, looking at Noah and Mia playing nearby with Santana's children, who were beginning to trust again after their own rescue. The guilt never completely goes away, he said honestly. But I've learned that guilt is just love with nowhere to go. The best thing you can do with that energy is pour it into being the father your children need now. But the time we lost can't be recovered. But the time you have left together can be extraordinary if you focus on building rather than mourning. Over the following weeks, Jonathan found himself becoming an unofficial counselor for other parents in similar situations. The Elena Madison Foundation had identified dozens of cases where parental alienation, fraud, or simple bureaucratic failures had kept families separated. Each reunion brought its own challenges, but also its own miracles. Noah and Mia proved to be natural ambassadors for other children going through family reunification. Their resilience and joy in their own reunion gave other kids hope that their situations could improve too. The thing about having a dad, Noah told one frightened 6-year-old during a foundation event, is that he doesn't care if you're scared or sad or angry. He just wants to love you and help you feel safe. It takes a little while to believe it's real, but then it's the best thing ever. 1 year after that first 911 call, Marcus stood in Jonathan's backyard watching a barbecue that had expanded to include 3 other reunited families, various foundation staff members, Mrs. Chen, Dr. Kim, and several children's friends from school. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the air, creating a symphony of healing that Marcus had never imagined possible. Jonathan found him near the garden, where tomatoes and sunflowers grew in abundance. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Noah hadn't been brave enough to make that call? Jonathan asked. Marcus considered the question, watching Mia chase fireflies while Noah helped grill vegetables with the focused attention he brought to everything he cared about. I think your kids would have found a way to survive and thrive regardless. They're remarkable human beings, but I'm grateful every day that we found each other when we did. So am I. You didn't just reunite our family, you showed us how to use our experience to help others. That's given meaning to everything we went through. As the evening wound down and families began to head home, Noah and Mia helped clean up with the kind of cheerful cooperation that came from feeling secure in their place in the world. "Daddy," Mia said as they collected paper plates and cups, "do you think there are still kids out there who need to call 911 to find their families?" "Probably, sweetheart. But now there are people like Uncle Marcus and organizations like our foundation to help them. And there are kids like you and Noah who understand what it's like and can help them feel less alone." "Good, because being alone is really hard, but being together is really, really good." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Jonathan sat in his study looking at the framed photo that held the place of honor on his desk. It showed the three of them in their garden, dirt-stained and laughing, with Mia holding up a sunflower that was almost as tall as she was. Next to it sat one of Elena's letters, not one of the desperate pleas that had never reached him, but the final letter where she'd written about love transcending pain and children growing up to change the world. It served as a daily reminder that some losses couldn't be recovered, but new love could always be built. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Another case in Dallas, 12-year-old boy missing father intercepted communications. Foundation team deploying tomorrow. Thank you for showing us how to turn tragedy into hope. Jonathan smiled, understanding that their story had become larger than just their own healing. Every family they helped reunite, every child who found their way home, every parent who discovered they weren't alone, it all traced back to a 10-year-old boy brave enough to dial 911 and ask for help. The house settled around him with the peaceful sounds of a home filled with love. The hum of the heating system keeping his children warm, the tick of the grandfather clock marking time they now had in abundance, the distant sound of Mrs. Chen finishing her evening routine in the kitchen. 2 years ago, Sarah Mitchell had set in motion a conspiracy designed to keep Jonathan isolated and alone, believing that broken hearts stayed broken forever. She had counted on his grief overwhelming his hope, on lies being stronger than love, on separation being permanent. She had underestimated the power of a child brave enough to ask for help. She had underestimated the determination of a police officer who refused to ignore a cry for assistance. Most of all, she had underestimated the resilience of love itself, love that survived abandonment, overcame lies, and ultimately brought families home. As Jonathan turned off the lights and headed upstairs to check on his sleeping children one more time, he carried with him the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, against all odds, broken things could be made whole again. And once healed, they could help heal others. The 911 call that had started with a child's desperate plea had become a foundation for hope, proof that families could overcome any obstacle when they refused to give up on each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families to help, new opportunities to turn pain into purpose. But tonight, for the thousands of families they'd helped reunite, everyone was home where they belonged. And that was everything.